Sparta was never a large empire. They weren't rich, they didn't try to conquer the world, and yet they dominated Greece for like 300 years. Now, this is not a movie breakdown. This is about who the Spartans actually were, how they became the most feared soldiers in the ancient world, and whether they actually deserve the title of history's greatest warriors. Sparta wasn't a culture that happened to fight. It was a military system disguised as a city-state. Every aspect of life served one goal: producing hoplites. Their secret weapon was a program known as the Agoge. The Agoge was not merely a school. It was a state-sponsored machine designed to break the child and rebuild him as a weapon of the state. The process began at age 7, when boys were forcibly removed from their mothers and homes. They were placed into communal barracks called Agoge, effectively transferring their allegiance from their biological families to the state. This separation was absolute, ensuring that from his earliest memories, a boy understood that he belonged to Sparta, not to himself or his parents. Life within the barracks was defined by deliberate suffering. Boys were given only one garment to wear year-round to harden them against the elements, and were forced to sleep on beds of reeds that they plucked by hand. Food was kept intentionally scarce to induce a constant state of hunger. This starvation served a tactical purpose, though. It forced the boys to steal to survive. Theft was encouraged as a method to develop stealth and cunning and resourcefulness, traits essential for a soldier. However, the punishment for being caught was severe flogging. The lesson was distinct. Morality was irrelevant. Competence and success were everything. The physical beatings and psychological conditioning stripped away fear and individuality. Competition was fierce and constant, pitting boy against boy in wrestling and combat to establish a pecking order, yet fostering a deep, trauma-bonded brotherhood among the survivors. By the time a young man graduated at age 20, the Agoge had successfully instilled a rigid hierarchy of loyalty: Sparta first, the unit second, and the self last. The result was a citizen who feared disgrace more than death, and whose identity was entirely subsumed by the needs of the city-state. The Krypteia, often translated as the secret thing or the secret service, was the apex of the Spartan training system, reserved only for the most promising young men who had excelled in the Agoge. It served a dual purpose. It was the final exam for the soldier and a brutal installment of state terror designed to control the helots, the vast population of enslaved people upon whose labor Sparta relied. Young men selected for the Krypteia were sent into the countryside, often barefoot and armed with nothing but a dagger. They were expected to survive entirely on their own, sleeping in rough conditions and hiding during the day. By night, they transformed into hunters. Their mission was to identify and murder the strongest, bravest, and most capable helots, those most likely to lead a revolt. This was not open warfare. It was an exercise in stealth, assassination, and psychological warfare, ensuring the slave population remained leaderless and terrified. To justify these actions within Greek religion, the Spartan leadership would formally declare war on the helots every year upon taking office. This legal maneuver stripped the helots of human rights and ensured that killing them was considered an act of war rather than murder, protecting the young Spartans from miasma, or ritual pollution. For the young Spartan, the Krypteia was the ultimate proof that he could kill cold-bloodedly for the state, completing his transformation from a boy into a ruthless instrument of Spartan dominance. Graduating from the Agoge and the Krypteia did not mark the end of a Spartan's training. Rather, it signaled the beginning of his career as a professional soldier. Unlike their rivals in Athens or Corinth, who were farmers and artisans that only trained part-time, the Spartans were history's first full-time army. They were forbidden from trade or agriculture, leaving those tasks to the helots so that they could dedicate every waking hour to the art of war. The core of this adult training was the Syssition, the communal mess hall where men ate their daily meals. Election to a mess was mandatory for citizenship, and rejection meant social exile. Men lived in these barracks until age 30, even if they were married. This constant proximity created a psychological bond deeper than family. They learned the habits, temperaments, and breathing of the men who would stand next to them in the shield wall, ensuring that in the chaos of battle, they moved as a single entity. While the Agoge focused on individual toughness, adult training focused on unit synchronization. The Spartans practiced drilling relentlessly, mastering complex maneuvers that other Greek armies just found impossible. They learned to wheel the line, countermarch, and change formation instantly in response to trumpet calls or rhythmic piping. This created a level of muscle memory where, under the stress of combat, a Spartan didn't need to think, he just simply reacted. Physical conditioning remained brutal, though. Adult Spartans engaged in constant athletic competition, wrestling, running in full armor and throwing the javelin to maintain peak physical condition well into middle age. A Spartan was liable for military service until age 60, meaning the old guard were often the most dangerous men on the field, possessing decades of drilled lethality. The genius of the Spartan war machine lay in the mechanics of the Phalanx. It relied entirely on the hoplon, a massive concave shield made of wood and bronze. Crucially, the shield was too heavy to be wielded effectively by a single man for his own protection alone. It was designed to cover the left side of the bearer and the unshielded right side of the man standing next to him. This created an unbreakable chain where every soldier's life depended on the man to his right holding his ground. Offensively, the Phalanx was a forest of spears. The Spartans wielded the dory, a 7 to 9 foot spear tipped with iron and counterbalanced by a bronze spike on the butt known as the lizard killer, allowing it to be used even if the shaft snapped. In battle, the formation operated like a steamroller. The rear ranks physically shoved the men in front of them forward, a terrifying phenomenon known as othismos, or the shoving, driving the spear points into the enemy with the collective mass of the entire unit. It was this wall of bronze and pressure that King Leonidas would use in one of the most famous battles in all of history. The story of the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC is one of mankind's most staggering examples of defiance. It was not merely a military engagement, it was a collision between an unstoppable force and an immovable object. Opposing them was King Xerxes of Persia, commanding an army estimated by ancient sources to be in the millions, though some modern historians suggest hundreds of thousands. But even the lower estimates represent a force so massive that it reportedly drank rivers dry. King Leonidas led a small coalition, including just 300 Spartan citizens, to the narrow pass of Thermopylae, which translates to the Hot Gates. Here, numbers became irrelevant. The sheer mass of the Persian army became a bottleneck. For 2 days, the Spartans slaughtered wave after wave after wave of elite Persian infantry. When Xerxes demanded that they surrender their arms, Leonidas famously replied, "Molan labe," come and take them. The Spartans fought with such synchronized lethality that the most powerful empire on earth was brought to a halt by a force 0.0003% of its size. They were betrayed, however, by a local Greek who revealed a mountain path to the Persians, and the Spartans were eventually outflanked. Yet they did not retreat. They dismissed their allies and stayed to die, buying precious time for the rest of Greece to mobilize. Every single Spartan fell that day, but their sacrifice shattered the myth of Persian invincibility and galvanized the Greek resistance that would eventually save Western civilization. If Thermopylae was the heroic sacrifice, then the Battle of Plataea the following year was the decisive vengeance. It stands as an unbelievable accomplishment because it required a fractured, bickering collection of Greek city-states to unite and effectively annihilate a superpower's occupying force. While Thermopylae featured a small vanguard, Plataea saw the largest Greek army ever assembled up to that point. Approximately 40,000 to 110,000 Greeks, Spartans, Athenians, Corinthians, and others marched out to meet Mardonius, the Persian general left behind by Xerxes. They faced a Persian force that still vastly outnumbered them, entrenched in a fortified camp and supported by cavalry that the Greeks simply lacked. The battle began in chaos. During a night maneuver to secure water supplies, the Greek line became fragmented. Sensing weakness, Mardonius launched a full-scale assault. And this moment really highlights the supreme discipline of the Spartans. Led by the regent Pausanias, the Spartan contingent was subjected to a withering hail of arrows, yet they refused to advance. Pausanias was busy performing sacrifices, waiting for a favorable omen from the gods. And for long, agonizing minutes, the Spartans stood firm behind their shields, taking casualties without striking back, held in place only by their iron will. Finally, the omens were declared favorable, and the pent-up energy of the Spartan phalanx was unleashed. The collision was devastating. The lighter-armed Persian, though brave, could not penetrate the heavy bronze armor of the hoplites. The Spartans smashed through the Persian shield wall. When Mardonius himself was killed, struck down by either a Spartan rock or a spear, the Persian morale collapsed. What started as a disorganized retreat turned into a slaughter. The victory was so complete that it effectively ended the Persian threat to mainland Greece forever. It proved that a free people, when united and disciplined, could dismantle the might of an empire. History is filled with formidable warriors, but the Spartan achievement occupies a unique tier. While the Mongols or samurai or Romans, Vikings, and Apache, just to name a few, were undeniably lethal, the Spartan distinction lies not just in how they fought, but in the totality of their commitment. The Roman legionnaire was a superb professional soldier, but he was ultimately a man doing a job for pay and land. The samurai and the Mongol horsemen were elite castes within broader societies. They had peasants and artisans and merchants to sustain them. But Sparta was different. It was the only society in history where the entire state was a factory for a single product, the soldier. There were no Spartan artists. There were no Spartan farmers. There were no Spartan merchants. To be a Spartan was to be a warrior. This total terrifying singleness of purpose created a psychological hardening that no other culture could replicate. A Roman soldier might fear his centurion. A Spartan feared nothing but the shame of survival. The Vikings and the Apache were masters of the raid, utilizing shock, terror, and individual skill to overwhelm opponents. Their strength lay in ferocity and adaptability. Spartan strength was the opposite. It was the suppression of the individuality. A Viking sought personal glory and a seat in Valhalla. A Spartan sought only to keep the line unbroken. In the chaos of pre-modern warfare, where panic was the greatest killer, the Spartans were uniquely immune. They did not scream or charge wildly. They advanced in eerie silence to the sound of flutes. This unnatural discipline allowed them to dismantle armies far larger and more ferocious than themselves, proving that in the end, perfect order defeats perfect fury. Ultimately, the Spartan legacy is defined by the impossible stand. The Mongols conquered the world, but they rarely fought when the odds were hopeless. The Apache fought a brilliant guerrilla war, but avoided pitched battles they couldn't win. The Spartans are revered above all because they wrote the rulebook on the last stand. At Thermopylae, they demonstrated that victory isn't just about tactical success. It's about the moral victory of absolute refusal to yield. Other cultures fought to live or to conquer, but the Spartans were the only ones who trained their entire lives specifically to die well. And that is why, until the end of days, history's greatest warriors will always hail from Sparta. I'll see you next time.